Alright, as you approach the machine, first thing you're going to do is check your lights. Make sure they're mounted, secured, not broken or cracked. You're going to check under the equipment, make sure there's no leaks, no diesel or hydraulic. Then you check your blade, make sure there's no cracks or bends. Check your cutting blade at the bottom, make sure there's no broken welds. It's not overly worn and it's not damaged, bent, or cracked. This is your push beam connected to your push arms. These are your push arm cylinders. Make sure they're well greased. Check for pitting. This one has a lot of pitting. Make sure they're well greased. These are your lift cylinders. Again, check for pitting. Make sure they're not bent or cracked. Make sure they're well greased. Check your hydraulic hoses all the way through. Make sure they're connected on both ends, secured tightly. Make sure there's no leaks, no cuts or abrasions. When you get to your engine, you want to make sure that you check the engine oil, transmission oil, the coolant, your hydraulic oil, your window wiper fluid, and that's it. Here at the tracks, you want to check your track pads. Make sure they're not overly worn. Make sure all the bolts are tight, secured in place. And make sure there's nothing obstructing the pads in between. This is your front idler. This is your rear idler. This is your final drive and your final drive sprocket. The sprocket connects to the tracks. And your bottom rollers are obviously at the bottom. This is your slack adjuster right here. When you check the cab, you want to make sure you do a full walk around. Check all the windows, make sure there's no cracks, no breaks of any kind. Your window seals, you want to make sure there's no tears or openings anywhere. Your window wipers, you want to make sure they're not overly worn. Make sure they have all their components in place and secured tightly. Your catwalk, you want to make sure all the handles are secured tightly and that nothing is broken and cracked to keep you from any accidents. Your exhaust, you want to make sure it's secured tightly, and if you have an exhaust shield, you want to make sure that's secured tightly to the exhaust. On your cab, you have your rollover protection structure. Make sure that doesn't have any breaks or missing hardware, and that is not overly rusted. When you get to the back, you have your ripper assembly. You have your ripper cylinders. You want to make sure those aren't pitted. Make sure they're not bent or cracked, and that they're greased, well greased. You have your hydraulic hoses. Again, make sure they're secured tightly on both ends. Make sure there's no cuts or abrasions, no leaks of any kind. On your ripper assembly, make sure nothing's bent, cracked. All the pins are in place. And the pins have their retainers on them. Your ripper itself, you want to make sure that's not bent, cracked in any way. Make sure it's not missing any hardware. And your ripper tooth, you want to make sure it's not overly worn, not missing any pins. And once you get to the back, you want to check all the lights in the back, make sure they're mounted, secured, not broken or cracked. And that concludes the pre-trip.